Good afternoon, everybody. How are we all? Good, good. That's a good. That is good. I'm going to be talking in the next hour or so about script development. There's a picture of the London Tube that I have as a test slide. So my name is Ludo. It's very nice that I was introduced as Ludwig. I don't think anybody has called me that since my grandmother died. Bless her, she'd be very proud. But please do call me Ludo. I am always slightly apprehensive about standing up in front of people and talking about what I do. So thank you very much for coming to listen. Please also contribute. I'm going to be asking lots of questions. So please also return the favor by giving me answers. You can also ask me questions too. That's all part of the deal. And I guess the other thing is that when I do this kind of thing, standing up and talking about script development and the work that I do and the things that I've learned doing it, I kind of get a little bit nervous because I know that when it comes to screenwriting and people that work with screenwriters, there is a circuit of gurus, quote unquote, and when I see things like masterclass up there, it kind of, look, this is not a class, I am not a master. As long as we're cool with that, then everything else is fine. What do I need to know from you? Well, I want to find out a little bit about you. Before I do that, just start writing a few things up. One, Ludo, that's me. What do I do? Well, I work as a script editor, a script consultant. As I explained to my mother, who keeps introducing me as a screenwriter, still after 20 years. I do everything to do with scripts except write them. So I'm not talking to you from the position of somebody who writes scripts. I'm talking to you from the position of somebody who works with screenwriters on their scripts. Yeah, we're all comfortable with the notion that somebody comes up with an idea for a film, be it a screenwriter or anybody else, and a screenwriter then goes away and turns that idea into a script. Between that point and filming it, there is this kind of weird process called script development, in which sometimes a person like myself, not always, but sometimes a person like myself can be involved. Okay? So that's what I do. I work with writers over a number of drafts of their screenplay and hopefully get it as, I guess, working from first principles here, the thing that we're all trying to do is get it as good as it possibly can be before the expensive bit happens, before it goes in front of camera. Just also by way of instruction, I also do a little bit of training in both screenwriting and script development in the UK and internationally. And I run a co-tutor, of course, with another script editor for a film school in the UK called the National Film and Television School. And for 10 years now, we've been running a diploma in script development, which is still the only long-form course of its kind in the world. There's a number of reasons why that is. Perhaps we can get into them later. But anyway, that's me. So what I would like to hear from you is a little bit about, perhaps we can maybe just keep it to word association, a little bit of free association to start off with. And just, if you can just kind of shout out to me words that come into your head to do with screenwriting and developing scripted material. Plot, character art. Themes. Arc. More arcs. Conflict. Three acts. Exposition. Tone. Was there a tone? Tone. Tone. Dialogue. Structure. Thank you. Writer's room. Could almost do that in song. Yeah. Set up. Set up, set up, set up, set up. Get it, quick, get it in. Quick, quick, quick. Yeah. Protagonist. Antagonist. Sorry, what was that at the back? Right. To go with setup. Payoff. Visuals. Visuals. Whoa, man. Sid Field's next door. Well, yeah, all right, come on, man. What about, okay, so now these are all kind of script and story things. What about in the development process? Any drafts? Yeah. Rewriting. For sure. Yeah. The Bible, thank you. Logline. Wicked. Sorry? Budget. Great. This is going to go on for like an hour. It's going to be a Hanukkah movie. Pardon? Breakdown. Yes. Excellent. Any other documents like that worth shouting out? Pardon? Treatment. Oh, this is so good. God, you guys can come again. Oh, we've had that, but... did we have a... Oh, no, you shouted it out and I didn't write it down. Thank you very much for being persistent. Right, that's good. We've kind of filled that up. We're starting to repeat ourselves. Good, okay. So let's talk a little bit about the process of... I'm going to find that again, am I? About the process of script development and see what we can cross off. So we've got lots of good terms here to do with storytelling, to do with cinematic storytelling, to do with screenwriting. I can see that you're all familiar with the need for a story to have dramatic conflict, and that comes from a character who is in some kind of world. Didn't get that, did we? Setting. And they have a problem, and that problem is hard because of the obstacles which create conflict. The way that's played out can be plot. What happens to the character, the journey that they go on, is their arc. Everyone's happy. Anything that's set up at the beginning pays off at the end. And when the conflict resolves, we understand the true meaning of the film. Yeah? True meaning of the story. I've not said anything controversial. right? You will understand that. You will know that. We will know it implicitly. If you work with story, I know you spend your time, we spend our time dealing with how to get the best of these things in the design of the story so that it's working, it's engaging an audience. Nobody mentioned that, did they? That the conflict is engaging an audience, that it is satisfyingly structured, and ultimately meaningful. Yeah? How hard can it be? So what are the problems that we face when we're trying to do this, when we're trying to get this story as engaging, as meaningful as possible? What are the problems that we face? Length. Too short, too long? Too long always, okay. It's too long. Insomnia, that's something else that you face. Maybe because you're spending too long writing a really long script. Anything else? Plot holes, yeah, okay. So what do you do about that? Fill them in. And there will also come a point where you have to give that work to somebody else to read. And this is where things start to get a bit tricky, because for writers, and this is something that I almost consciously actually remind myself of every time I sit down to read a screenplay or stand up. I do a lot of standing up reading these days. Don't know why that is. Anyway. To remind yourself that there is a film running in that screenwriter's head. They have a particular format to express that film in terms of words on a page that becomes this thing called a screenplay, script, that then goes to somebody else, somebody that they may not know, in a country that they've never even been to. And the reader sits down with that script, and the hope is that the film that was running in the screenwriter's head has made it both onto the page, well enough for it to then come off the page into the reader's head and start running in the reader's head. Yeah? So there's a tremendously fragile process of translation that's happening there that I think it's always worth remembering, if you're a screenwriter, that that's going to happen. Yeah? And that you have an obligation to take control of the reader's imagination. Unhelpfully for you, you don't even know who that reader is. And similarly for the reader, whoever you are, in whatever context you're reading the script, that when you sit down to read a script, you allow the writer to take control of your imagination. Yeah? That you sit down to read it and give it every last bit of your attention. You turn your phone off. You do as, you've done everything that you can without actually going to sit in a darkened room as you would with a piece of cinema to look up at the screen, but you do everything you can to allow that imagination of the writer to come into your own head and do the things with it in story terms that a piece of cinema would do when you go in to see a film. I used to run a lot of courses many years ago to help script readers, as we have them in the UK industry, lots of people who cover script material for film companies and write reports on them. I used to do a lot of training for people who were readers or wanted to be readers. And what I found in doing that is that there is a real art to reading a screenplay, to breaking it down, but also that a lot of people think that because they like films and because they can read, they know how to read a screenplay. Yeah? And I would argue that actually that's not the case. Yeah? Not only is there this very fragile process of translation happening, but scripts are very, as we know, very weird things because it's not the finished product. Yeah? They are a halfway house to the film. Yeah? So you need to make sure when you sit down to read a script, and I'm sorry if this sounds like common sense, but I meet too many people that don't really do this, and you can tell that they don't do this because of the way they talk about scripted material. They don't read the script as a film. Yeah? Similarly with some writers, they don't write the script as a film. So the obligation cuts both ways. So what do we do? What do we do in that process of feedback? What do we do when we sit down with a writer and talk to them about the work that they've written? In the UK, there is very much quite a big, well, certainly compared to some other countries, there's quite an accepted practice of script editors, as we very often call them, or script consultants, sitting down with a writer to help them over this process of drafts. So, but it can be the producer, yeah, it can be the director. It's anybody who isn't the writer is sitting down to talk to them about something that they've written, to give some feedback, perhaps. But the understanding being that there is going to be another draft of the script. So what do you do in that process? What are you going to do when you kind of come in to that process, when you're invited in to give some feedback? How are you going to go about doing that? Do you? No, maybe, not sure. So you do. Okay, so well, you see, the thing is that, I would just say this, that there is, as we know, no single one way of making a film. And there are filmmakers who absolutely and utterly don't necessarily need any kind of, intervention or help or, script editing help. That's fine. But assuming you were dealing with a project where the writer does need some help, what are you going to do? How are you going to go about kicking this process off? Maybe over, there's some conversation, maybe you're going to work through a couple of drafts, perhaps, over a few months. You get handed the script, what are you going to do? Right, so let's have a thing. I'm going to tell you, but I'm going to tell you because I want to understand what it is that you might do, because it's actually, there is a certain amount of logic to this as well. So what would you do? Here, I've written a script. Oh, it's a surprise. I'm all of a sudden, am I right? And my mum was right. I give it to you. What are you going to do?
I would like to understand your intention.
My intention. My intention is that I'm giving you the script, and I want you to tell me that it's perfect. Okay, that's my intention. My vision is in the script. It's all there. I'm not going to explain my film to you. Pardon? Read it. Good. Yes. Yeah. Okay, it's all there in the script. Visualize it. So you're going to read it, you're going to visualize it, then what are you going to do? Break it down. How are you going to break it down? By going through it scene by scene. Got time on your hands. The main character, yeah. Who's it about? What do they want? What do they need? Like it? What's the arc? Where do they end up? So hang on. So we've got character, want, need. What's the next thing we need? Yes. What's in the way? Okay. And then how it ends. Okay, so that's quite simple. Who is it about? What do they want or need or obliged to do? What's standing in their way? How does it end? Okay? Hold on. We're going to get there in a second. Just park that thought for a moment because we're going to return to that. So just at that point, that's where people start falling down. Okay? So first and foremost, what I do is, who's it about? Make sure that feels like the protagonist. Might be a group, might be an individual. That's who I think it is. And then I write down a list of all the things that they want, need, obliged to do at any point in the story. Beginning, middle, end. Yeah? I don't think, a lot of people make the mistake of going, oh, well, in the first 10 or 15 pages, what is it that they're saying that they want to do? Okay? Don't get sidetracked by that. Just write that list of all the things they need obliged to do, and then take a step back and have a look at that list and think, okay, so which of these do I think is the reason the story is being told? Yeah? Some people call it the dramatic goal. Some of those wants and needs might actually just be character motivation, right? But you just write that huge list and then think, in the story, as in the story material that's being presented in the screenplay, what do I think the dramatic goal is? And actually what starts to happen is you start to split between the story material and the way it's presented in the screenplay. Okay? And for me, personally speaking, that's a really useful way in, because once you do the analysis of the story, then you can come back to the screenplay and see how well or not it's being told in the script. So it gives you an initial degree of assessment. So then we've got character, we've got goal, and then we can look at all the obstacles, conflict. Is it engaging? Does it last the course? Kind of ask those kind of questions. How does it end? And then that resolution of the conflict then allows us to then think about, when we've read the script, how it made us feel. A message, yeah. And we all understand that that's how stories work, whether it's a very simple, fable from Aesop several thousand years ago, where there's a nice little message, universal message that's given to us about our understanding of the way life works. You can do that. You can say, well, if I was Aesop, how would I sum this up? What does it tell me about my understanding of the world? What does it resonate with emotionally in me? And try and articulate that. And once you have that, what is this about in terms of the drama, and what does this mean in terms of its theme and the story's attitude to the theme, then you have the sort of first base breakdown of the story. Yeah? But just before you then go waltzing back into the script to have a look at how well that then plays out, the other thing that I like to do is just have a little think at this point about the context in which it's happening. Because we've just done an analysis of the story in terms of dramatic conflict and in terms of theme. But remember, this is a work of cinema. Okay? So that obliges the question, why is this a film? Yeah? So that's for me, that's my checklist of 3. Can I define the dramatic conflict in the story? Can I articulate what its underlying message is in terms of its meaning? And does it demand its telling as a film? Yeah? And that's quite a hard question to answer sometimes. And it can be for all manner of reasons. But I think it's a very useful question to ask of material and keep asking as you go through the process. Because this is not a story that's occurring in some kind of vacuum. It has a medium. Yeah? And that medium is film. So there we go. We've got our breakdown of the story. We go back into the script. We say, okay, well, look, there's this really engaging story, but maybe it's not coming across that well in the screenplay. Let's have a think about why that is. And off you go into the world of problems. Yeah? Write all those down. Have a think. I'm going to come back to you. Have a think about what the writer's intention is to tell this kind of story in this kind of way. And then you have a nice little checklist in front of you that you can take in to a meeting. Yeah? You can take into a meeting with a writer. So good. We've done our preparation. We've read the script. We've broken it down. We have some understanding of how the story works. We have some understanding of how the script does or doesn't work and fulfill that story. We have some thoughts about the kind of film that it is. We maybe have some references to help us. and we can go into a room with a writer and start talking to them about their screenplay. Back to the beginning again. What do we do now? We come in, we sit down. Hello, how are you? Seen anything good recently? Oh, yeah. Been at the Dubai Film Festival, loads of great films. Tell me about that. Chit chat, chit chat. Then what happens? You have to get to the point where you start talking about the script. How are you going to do that? Tell them what worked. Yes. You have a name for that. The something sandwich. You can tell them what worked. Yeah, that's one strategy for sure. I really loved the way this character did something or other, and that was, something very meaningful about it. Or, yeah. Anything else? Find the weaknesses. Yeah, I really hated the way this character did so. Yeah. For instance, yeah, you can do that. Anything else? Ask some questions. What questions are you going to ask? Why did you write this? What a great question. Why? Can you, just before we start talking, can you just tell me why you wrote this? But why is a great question. And there are script editors around the world who pretty much only ever ask that question, right? It's very good. Me personally, I find it leads to a little bit too many tears too quickly, but some people do it. Why? Yeah. So perhaps we could soften that slightly. Yeah. Tell me about your story. Yeah. How did you come about writing this? Yeah. Background. How did you come up with this idea? What made you come up with this idea? Yeah. Do a little bit of origin story. Now, writers that are experienced in the development process know this is coming. And you know how experienced they are in the process when you ask that question and they give you a very rehearsed answer. And you have to, find a way of taking them out of their rehearsed, well, that's interesting. Tell me about this. Ask them a few questions. So good. So we get the origin story. And why? But why is that useful? Understand the core value of the story. Yeah? What a core value in terms of to the writer. Yeah? So it's not just the core value to us as we've understood it. We're starting the process of trying to understand why this story and why this writer. Yeah? Now, you're not going to get a straight answer. Yeah? Very unlikely. You will get a good answer very often, but you won't get a straight answer. That normally comes in meeting 2, 3, 4. Yeah? Once you've got under the skin a little bit, into the head, that kind of thing. But that's you need to start that process going. You need to get an understanding of how they've come up with it, but also what their connection to the material is. Because that's ultimately what you're doing. So we get some idea of their connection to the material. We're starting to get some idea of what their intention is. Yeah? And you're marrying that up with what you've understood from the story material, what you've understood from the script, and now what they are telling you about their take on the material. Yeah? So you've got this kind of process of triangulation here. You've got a nice dialogue going, and no matter how well prepared you are, as you should be going into a meeting with a writer, this is where development starts. Yeah? You can be, obviously you've read the script, maybe even twice, you've done all your work, but the point at which they start talking is where the synthesis of what they're saying, the way they're discussing their work, comes to you in terms of the way you've analyzed it. And the questions start coming off the back of that. That's interesting. You talk about it in this way. It's because I didn't quite see this in the script. Can you tell me a bit more about that? Yeah? Drawing out, drawing out, drawing out. So while you can do what I loved about your script, and while you can do what I didn't love about your script, what you really want to do is just hear from the writer what they think about their story and what they think about their script. And the more that they do that, and they know that I know the writers in the room. It's not either side of the desk, writers know that this is a process that can be beneficial to them, and they know when it's happening. But very often they start to talk about things in a way which you can then spot some common patterns, or get to know them as a person and understand and help define what that true relationship is between the writer and the material. Yeah? And that is the beautiful and sometimes hellish process of development laid bare. Yeah? And the more that you discuss the work, the more you discuss their relationship to it, the more you discuss the script, the more you can draw them into areas which maybe for you aren't working. Yeah? And very often as you do that, they will suddenly say, oh, but that doesn't really work. I've been explaining it like that, but now I realize I've written it. Great, tell me more about that. And what you want to do is try and get them into a position where, A, they start to understand the relative strengths and weaknesses in the script. And once they understand some of the weaknesses, start to have a think about what they might do next in the next draft of the script to solve those issues. Okay, too often in script development, we get the situation of, I've read your script, I'm going to tell you what's wrong with it, and I'm going to give you some things to do to go away and fix it. Yeah? It happens, I know it happens all the time. People like myself, and I'm sure various others of you in the room, try and avoid that as much as possible. If a writer is going to go away and rewrite their draft, you have to be very clear about who the writer is, i.e. not you, not me. Yeah? That if you're going to empower them to fix any issues in the script, one, they have to come to an understanding and an agreement of what that problem is. Best way to do that is for them to have the idea themselves. Secondly, they then need to understand what, and have some idea of how they're going to fix it. Now, that may not happen in the room, yeah? Or a version of it might happen in the room, but they have to come up with it. If they're going to write it, if they're going to fix it, then they have to, the more they come up with the idea, the more chance they have of making that work when they go back and face the tyranny of the blinking cursor. Yeah? So ultimately, what you're doing here is, how can we sum up the process? That process is finding what is meaningful to the writer in the story and helping them make it meaningful to the audience. Yeah? And if you can use that as your way in to the script and its analysis, and your way into a meeting to get them to talk about that, what is meaningful to them in lots and lots of different ways, keep coming at it from lots and lots of different angles, lots of open questions. If you get stuck, just keep moving it along. And ultimately, in theory, you get them to the point where they understand, they can see their script and how it's been taken by the reader, and they can go back and fix the issues within it. Now, they may not fix it first time. You may have to come at it again and again. Sometimes those issues can't be resolved in one pass of the script. But once you open that process, you're then duty-bound to keep reading it until it's fixed. Yeah? So be clear about your role. Be clear about the way in which you're going to support the writer. Don't cut them adrift. Yeah? Read their work, respond to their anxieties and issues to do with the script as much as possible, and help them in that process. Yeah? There is no point us leading it. We can only support, and the writer will thank you for it. Yeah? Does that make sense? I'm not giving you anything, there's no secrets here, but there's one thing that I'm aware of, because I find it in every day I sit down with a writer. There is, as with everyone who does this, there is a desire, once you engage with the story, once you engage with problems in the script, to try and find solutions. Yeah? And you must, if you're working with a writer, as in any kind of capacity, in development capacity, you must try and resist that. Sit on your hands and talk about what lies behind your solution. Yeah? The issue that lies behind it, never the solution itself. Yeah? So, there may be some things which we can look at to help us in this process, some of which were mentioned on here, on our board. Oh yes, talking of script analysis, here is a lovely artist, Tom Gould, who I think reads the same scripts we do. Here is his 4 undramatic plot structures. See how common this is. Number 1, ignoring the monster. The hero is confronted by antagonistic force. Good, good. And ignores it until it goes away. I've read that script. Number 2, erroneous accusation. The protagonist is accused of wrongdoing. Good. That's a good situation, right? Good setup. But it's not a big thing and soon gets sorted out. Definitely read that script. Number 3, the enigma unsolved. The heroine is faced with a problem, but it's really, really difficult. Good. So she gives up. Yeah. And lastly, my favorite, diminishing desire. A man wants something. Good start so far. Frank Daniel will be pleased. Later, he's not so sure. By supper time, he's forgotten all about it. I have seen that film many, many times. Okay, so again, as, amusing as this is, I think it, really this kind of went around like wildfire around the UK industry when it was published in the New Yorker, because I think the reason for that is that everybody faces this. Yeah, it's actually quite hard telling stories, and these are 4 of the commonest problems, I think, with scripts. So, let's have a quick look. Should we do treatment or development documents first? What would you like? Treatments. What is a treatment? Any ideas? No idea. Okay, so it's something that you take like a medicine to help you get better, look after your ailments. Perfect. Compressed version of the script, really, really small in small font. In prose, okay? So it's the story written out in prose, but we have quite a few different terms for that. We have synopsis, we have outline, treatment. What's the difference? Synopsis is just story? Short story? Yeah. Okay. So synopsis short, outline is structured, and then a treatment.
The treatment, as the lady said, but I'm talking about the other 2 things. But the treatment, I agree with her, as I know.
Yeah, I mean that's one way of looking at it. What I've found over the years is that people use them interchangeably, and I just spend my time asking people what they mean. For me, a synopsis is something that I write about somebody else's script, and I will do that for myself. In fact, in that process of, that's one thing that I perhaps should have mentioned, in that, the reading of the script, actually before I then go and analyze it, one of the things that I will do is write myself a synopsis. Yeah, 3 paragraphs, about 500 words, just beginning, middle, end. Yeah. Iron out all the plot holes, any of this is kind of telling the story in the best light. Done. Why? Because it's a very useful stepping stone for me into analysis, so that I've proved I do it completely from memory. Yeah, put the script down, put any notes that I've taken down, just write out the story, and you prove to yourself very quickly that you've understood the story. And in fact, no matter how problematic or bad the script is or appears to be, you can almost always write a fairly straightforward and engaging synopsis of it. And that's very useful. Yeah? Oh, right, okay, I see what the story is. Maybe it's not so bad. Yeah, maybe there's something to work with here. Yeah, maybe the problems are solvable. So there's the synopsis, then there's an outline, could be a page, could be 3 pages. 1-page outline, 1-pager, send me a 1-pager, I hear that a lot. Treatment, well, I hear some people say 1-page treatment sometimes, 3, 5-page, longer, 10, 40, 50. I mean, it can literally be any length. So if somebody is saying, oh, can I send you a treatment? I ask, how long is it? Yeah? If I hear people asking for treatment, you know, I will say, how long do you expect that to be? Yeah? Just very useful. I know these kind of terms get bandied around a lot, so I just think my note of caution is to always just double check with whoever's asking for it or whoever's sending it what they mean by it. If you look at all the applications to all of the funds in the UK and across Europe, which is where I mainly work, they're all different, and they all use different words for different things and require things at different lengths. Yeah? So you just have to be clear. The other thing that you need to be aware of, or at least this is what I find useful for me, is that when it comes to treatments, for me there's very much two distinct types. There's the treatment, which is a development document, a creative document, and it's only really written to be seen by the creative team, writer, director, producer. Yeah? That can be written very often between drafts. There's been some discussion of an issue to do in the story, and rather than commit to another draft, the writer's been invited to go away and just kind of write it out, get it structured in the treatment form, just for everybody to check that that kind of works before they go back and write the draft. Okay, we're familiar with that idea. Yeah. However, we're also familiar with the idea of the treatment as a selling document. Yeah. When you're trying to get people to invest in your project, yeah, or to find out about it in some way, shape, or form, you know, you've pitched it to them, or you've been invited to send them an idea, and it's like, oh, send me a treatment. So now somebody who doesn't have any awareness of what the material is about, or at least only a small amount, and you now have to send them something that in some way sells, that pitches, that offers up the story. So let's have a look at some examples. Well, over in, should we start there? Looper. Well, actually, no, I need to come back to that. You can't, let's never start with Looper. Let's have a look. Okay, I'm going to start with something. Okay, why don't we start with? Why don't we roll back the years? So here is a early treatment of Breathless, which was originally written by Truffaut, and there is something straight away, which we see an opening quote. Doesn't appear anywhere else in the treatment, just to prepare the reader for what they're about to receive. We're going to talk about very nasty things. Thank you. And on you go. There's here we have this is 10 pages. And it's written chronologically, and it just tells the story. Yeah? Away you go. Done. Let's come right up, well, not quite right up to date, a little bit further back. This is one of the most common ones that's, you know, circulating around when people ask what treatments are. This is over in Hollywoodland. Simon Kinberg's treatment for Mr. and Mrs. Smith. And here you have in the studio system where treatments are very, very common as both as selling and story documents. Here you have a very, very salesy treatment that's kind of particularly designed for Hollywood execs. Have a rather nice overview. It's, you know, it's broken down into very particular sections. It starts with an overview, character setup, which is basically some backstory, and then the story itself. You'll see lots of underlines there. You'll see some capital letters. You'll see short paragraphs and short sentences. So, you know, just to not bore the executive, and on it goes. And it's a, you know, it's a very, very, very good, effective piece of writing. I mean, let's just have a look at that opening paragraph. Mr. and Mrs. Smith is a sexy, stylized action comedy that's a duel to the death between the world's top two assassins, who happen to be husband and wife, hired to kill each other. In hunting each other, their dying marriage turns into a passionate love affair as they go toe-to-toe, playing cat and mouse, and slowly falling back in love in the process, seeing, understanding, appreciating each other for the very first time in the midst of battle. I'm in, right? Done, there's the concept. But then there's a nice little kicker in the second paragraph, just to let you know that this person's really thought about it. Their process is really like the process of marriage therapy, which is intended to help a couple initiate, interact, communicate, compromise, adapt, and ultimately fall in love. Through their hunt, they have to do these same things because they are also the primary skills an assassin uses with a mark: initiating, interacting, compromising, and adapting to the target. Lovely, well done. Good, you can make that. Well done, just get some good people in it. So again, that kind of idea of encapsulating the idea and giving the why before the rest of the story, very, very useful. The why, that's the Bible. The shining, that's a good one. Okay, so this is more of a, well, it's absolutely not more of, this is a story document, all 81 pages of it. How much time have we got? 10 minutes? 15, okay. So you can get this at Cinephilia and beyond. I'll post some links up later. And this is just written in 10 sequences. And as you can see, he likes space. Yeah. Should be 2001 pages. And on you go. So there's just a very simple breakdown of the story in terms of sequences as a unit of action, as a structural unit, and complete with the ending that he did end up not using. And then let's use something clean sweep. Okay, this is just a little detour. So this was for a film which never got made, unfortunately. And this is a very short, it's like 2-page document, more of an outline really than a treatment, perhaps, if you want to, muddle the terms up. And this is based on some real events as a setting, but the story is completely fictionalized. Okay? So what the writer has chosen to do is give the context for the setting, the true story in this case of a British island in the Indian Ocean, the Chagos Islands, a particular one called Diego Garcia, which it's a long story. The British did a very British thing with it, and so there's a page on the context of it, and then there's the story that the writer is choosing to tell, the fictionalized story. So they've just gone, bang, here's the context. Nobody really knows about this, so let's give the context for it first, and then let's give the story that they want to tell. So again, have a think about anything that you're working on. If it's done in that way, have a think about how you're going to present that information so the reader's going to have their best opportunity to understand it. Here's one I worked on many years ago. So again, they've gone for a quote from The Onion. Don't know if you know that news source, made slightly redundant in the advent of fake news. But anyway, back in a more innocent time, it was useful. World death rate holding steady at 100%. Limbo present day. And so here we are in a film, a way station film, an afterlife film, a purgatory film, one of those stories which are told in somebody's kind of post-life existence. Now, of course, there is an obligation in this kind of fictitious world to set up the rules. Yeah? So that's what they do. This is a comic tape. So he's gone, if you thought life was bollocks, wait until you get a load of death. Sorry, excuse my language, his language. left to loiter endlessly around the place you once lived, able to see and hear the living, but invisible to them and powerless to intervene. It's a lot to get your head around. And don't believe any of the myths. You can't walk through walls, you can't even open doors. You're powerless and constantly vulnerable to being trapped in confined spaces. Shops, changing rooms, bedrooms, they all present problems for the dead, especially if, like most deceased folk, you indulge in a bit of casual voyeurism. And on we go. And then there's, populated by morbid DIY, suicide, embittered primos, the prematurely dead, and lots of senile carpet slippers, pensioners. Limbo isn't known for its laughs. You have to keep your chin up if you want to survive. So again, the writer needs to take a decision to, okay, we've got a curious story world here, let's present that. One, and then Looper, because you asked. This is actually something that Rian Johnson posted up long after the film, and this was the short that he wrote initially where the idea came from. And I just like to show this sometimes because it's it's very useful in terms of how just to remind ourselves of the different voices that you can use in storytelling, even in a prose version of the story. Okay? So you've seen the film? Some of you have seen the film? Okay, so this will make more sense to those of you who've seen the film. We'll just start, just to have a quick look at the beginning here. A man in a coat and hat waits in an alleyway playing with a pocket watch. It's the italics bit. Time travel has not been invented yet, but in 30 years it will be. The mechanical process it requires will be cheap and relatively accessible to the public at large. Needless to say, it will be instantly outlawed with even unwitting accessories, family, friends, business partners, punished with death. This will not stop certain unscrupulous characters from using it to their own ends. I guess I indirectly fit into that category. With a flash of light, a second man appears in the alleyway. Without hesitation, the first man draws a gun and shoots him. Main title, Looper. Great. Really, really terrific. Nice little bit of, we get something to see. We get an explanation of context. Then just at the end of that explanation of context, it turns into voiceover. Yeah? The first person, I guess I indirectly fit into that category. Oh, I see, I'm being told something. And then back to what we see again, and on we go. And if you have a read of this, you'll end up seeing that actually it ended up being very close to the feature film that he ended up making. He didn't make this short. So again, just as a creative document, it goes to show that there's some value to be had in writing out the story in some way, shape, or form as a stepping stone to something bigger. And I can just show you. No, it's coverage reports. Just when I was talking about synopsis, while we're here, that's my 3-paragraph synopsis. That's 500 words. Yeah, beginning, middle, end. Just so what it looks like. And then this is just to show you. This is a document as an analytical document. This is a feedback report that's written for the writer. So this is where there's no meeting taking place. You're just writing notes on the script. And the ones that I write tend to be broken down into this, and the way I taught it when I was teaching script reading was in this way: premise, dramatic conflict, theme and meaning, context, why is this a film? Structure, how has the writer chosen to order the story? Characters, because that's the story. And then dialogue, something called visual grammar, which is just a posh way of saying, what are the cinematic techniques in there? Pace, and some kind of conclusion at the end about the development priorities and potential markets. Okay, so I don't know, do any of you guys write these kind of documents? Yeah, some nodding? Okay, yeah, good. And that's like 6 pages of stuff. For me, more useful to get across in a meeting. And then in terms of other development docs, there's some quite useful things to have a look at here. Beat sheet. Do we do a beat sheet? Did we get that? Scene breakdown. Okay, let's do breakdown. We had that. Where is it? There it is. Okay, so here's a template for a scene breakdown. I know that those of you who have writers who have expensive software, one of the bells and whistles, some of the bells and whistles that come with that software will give you, various options to break down a screenplay. And that will very often be in terms of we've got page number, scene number, if there is a scene number, location of the scene, the characters that appear in the scene, an action, the main action of the scene. Ludo gives a lecture. And that's your basic scene breakdown. Yeah, and that can be useful for, I'm sure you're all aware of just how useful that is, both in the pre-production process or just for a writer to see, to break down their script, and you can kind of see the pacing of it. You can see where characters come and go in it. And, it has some value in that you can kind of, see where the long scenes are, that kind of stuff. But what's useful for me, and, this takes about a day to do, is later on in the process, perhaps in pre-production, you might want to interrogate the script further. To do that, reading it scene by scene, analyzing it scene by scene, when the script, everyone's kind of happy with the script and you kind of need to do one last check. And that's where the kind of script breakdown as a scene analysis, which is what we're going to do here, becomes useful. And that's where you start to interrogate each scene in terms of its relevance to plot, in terms of its relevance to character, and in terms of its relevance to theme. Okay? But just if you're ever going to do this, and if you ever do this, please, please, please remember that if you're going, you need to work out, you need to express what the plot is in terms of its dramatic question, and you need to say what the main theme is, what its meaning is. Yeah? Because if you just go into this scene breakdown, you'll just end up without doing that, you'll just write down any old nonsense. Yeah? And you'll just end with like a theme column of 50 themes. Yeah? Oh, this scene appears to be about love. This scene appears to be about the price of milk. This, and on you go. So first, if you're ever going to do this, make sure you write out what the dramatic question is and what the theme or controlling idea or meaning is. And then you take that into each scene and go, how does this scene contribute to plot? How does this scene contribute to character? How does this scene contribute to theme? You can you can write all this down into index cards and put them up on the wall. I redecorated after this. Wood chip paper, it's a bugger to get off. And there we are, and kind of laid out in sequences, all up on the wall. Just to give you a little detail of that, we like to use some colored pens for plot, character. Oh, no, not that one. There it is. Plot, character, and theme. We've used the printout from the script for the slug line, for the scene numbers and location. And then we've written the main action of the scene, its contribution to plot, its contribution to character, and its contribution to theme in different colors. And then once you've got that up on the wall, you can then start to see where the gaps are. Yeah? And if there's no contribution to plot, character, or theme, then let's go and have a look. Let's have another look at that scene. Did we get that right? Do we miss something? No? Okay. Then you have a legitimate question. What is that scene doing in this script? Yeah? If there's one thing in it, well, let's have a look at let's take all the ones with one. Do we really need it? Or can we take that one thing and put it in another scene? Yeah? Sorry? If the director's an idiot, yes, well, maybe don't get involved with him in the first place. But if you have to, yeah, that might help. If there's two things, maybe one of the ones might be able to link up with one of the twos. Yeah? Sorry? Yeah. So you can start to play around, and much more easily, because, my God, scripts are cumbersome things. Yeah? All you writers know that. As soon as you start pulling around and changing things around, everything starts falling, and it's... If you get it up in terms of cards, then you're in a better position. The script is still the script, and you can start playing around with it and see how it works. Or not, as the case may be. If we've got time, quick look at some outlines. Oh, just... So while we're still on cards, over in TV land, if you follow, all the writers' rooms now have, quite a large social media presence, and Better Call Saul are particularly active, and they tweet pictures from their writers' room the whole time, including stuff like this. So they've, in the writers' room, when they've broken down the story, when they've broken down a series, they then got each episode in terms of its key scenes, broken down in terms of teaser, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, Act 4, and each scene is having to do 3 things, and is relating back to, and then there's numbers there in terms of relating back to different episodes of what it's picking up on. Good luck with that. And what else is useful? In terms of a breakdown, you can use a flip chart. So here is more of a structural breakdown of a film called World's End, and the writers here, Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg. In fact, I think that's Edgar Wright's finger, just there. To breaking down, I mean, they very much follow a 3-act model, a hero's journey model, and they're checking that their script works. In fact, there's even page numbers there, checking that the structure of their script works as they've intended it to, and that the conflict is escalating and so on and so forth. And it's just a very, very useful way for them to step out of the script. That's what all these documents are doing, helping you step out of the script to check in different ways that the story works. Cool, so I'm getting the sign to reach the climax and resolution. Just one last thing, if I've got time to show the fairy tale, okay. So there's a Scottish filmmaker called Alexander McKendrick who worked in Ealing Studios many decades ago in the UK and had a very good run of films as a screenwriter, and then went to Hollywood and made A Sweet Smell of Success. And not much after that, but he used the fairy tale structure, Once Upon a Time, to help him structure stories. And if you read, there's a very nice book of his lecture notes called On Filmmaking by Alexander McKendrick. He takes some stories through that, breaks it down in terms of fairy tale. I find that really useful to do with stories. I find it useful to give to writers to do. Go away. And there they are, there's the fairy tale beats. What I've taken from that and what I do with writers is actually then, rather than just as plot, then get them to write it, get their story as a fairy tale. Let's leave the world and characters that you've presented behind, and let's find a fairy tale version of your story. And that's very useful, again, because it starts to reveal where problems lie in the story, very often to do with structure, lack of conflict, so on and so forth. And what's very, I think, very apparent is how close film storytelling is to fairy tales. To give you an example, and perhaps to end on, here's one that I wrote for Billy Elliot. It's a film you're familiar with about a boy who wants to be a ballet dancer. Yeah? Is that, you know that? Yes? No? Maybe? Sure? Come on, Ludo, we need to go. So just give that out quickly. So once upon a time, in the north of the kingdom, in the land of diggers, there lived a boy called Billy, who dreamed of flying like a bird. But diggers weren't birds and couldn't be, as his friends and family all reminded him. So one day it happened that Billy found a bird school and enrolled. So then, as a result of which, the bird fairy saw he was good and deep down a true and talented bird, and tried to help him. But meanwhile, his digger father was fighting the evil queen who was at war with all diggers. So, unbeknownst to the bird fairy, he stopped his son from learning to fly. This was not a time to be different. Diggers needed to stand up for themselves. Until the time came that the father spied on Billy trying to fly and saw his true son for the first time. When suddenly, to the surprise of Billy and the bird fairy, he dropped his fight and helped his son to the land of the birds. So it turned out that the birds saw Billy as one of their own, and that he had the support of his father and the diggers, despite the war with the evil queen. And forever after, Billy was a bird who could fly beautifully from a proud family of diggers. even though they lost the war. Okay, so there's no mention of miners, there's no mention of ballet. You have taken the predominant visual image of the film there for Bird in Flight, for Billy, and just simply written it out as a fairy tale. Yeah, and again, a good exercise to do for your story. So time is up. I'm here for questions. Thank you. Yeah, very quickly. Afterwards. Yeah. I'm here for questions, and that's it. Thank you.